What's up guys, welcome to a new episode of Filmmaking Friday. Today we're going to talk all about camera movements.
Filmmaking Friday.
Welcome back. Today we're going to dive into the world of camera movement, how you can move your camera, when to use which movements and which emotions you can achieve with those movements. So let's jump right in. I don't really know if the first one is really considered a camera move, probably not, but it also wouldn't have felt right to just leave it out. So let's start with a static shot. It is as straightforward as it gets, a shot where the camera remains completely still. It's the simplest form of putting your camera up to film something, and because of that very often gets overlooked. But if used right and with a good composition, a still shot from a tripod can look really amazing. A static shot keeps the camera fixed in one position, providing a stable, non-moving view of the subject. It's like capturing a photograph, but with the added element of time and movement inside the frame. Static shots are great for scenes that require a sense of calm, stability, and contemplation. They can also be used to create tension by keeping the camera still while the action unfolds within the frame. Since the camera isn't moving, framing becomes even more critical. Make sure the composition is intentional, whether it's centered, asymmetrical, or using leading lines. Now, let's look at the pan. This is where the camera moves horizontally, either from left to right or right to left. A pan shot is achieved by rotating the camera on its axis horizontally. It reveals new parts of the scene or follows a moving subject. You can also use a pan to reveal important details in the scene, like moving from a close-up to a wide shot, or just to follow a character's movement across the scene. It's also great for creating a sense of scale or showing an expansive environment. Of course, you can do a pan and also some of the following camera movements on a tripod using a fluid head for a smooth, stable cinematic motion, or handheld if you want some intentional jerky motion, like for example in our next movement, the whip pan. A whip pan is a regular pan but much faster. It creates a blur as the camera quickly moves from one side to the other. The motion is rapid, creating a blur in the shot. It can be used to follow fast-paced action or as a transition between two scenes. If you end the first clip with a whip pan and start the second clip with another whip pan, then make a cut when both clips get blurry, you get a seamless whip pan transition. Whip pans are often used in action scenes to convey speed or chaos, and they're also popular for comedic effect, especially when used to reveal something surprising or unexpected. Adding a sound effect during a whip pan can emphasize the movement and make the transition feel more intentional. Next up, the tilt. A tilt involves moving the camera vertically, either up or down, while keeping it in a fixed horizontal position. A tilt is similar to a pan, but moves the camera on a vertical axis, revealing new parts of the scene from bottom to top or top to bottom. Tilts are great for emphasizing the size of a tall building, revealing a character from the feet up, or showing a subject's reaction. It can also create suspense when used to reveal something slowly, and while a slow tilt can create a dramatic effect, a faster tilt can add urgency. And of course, you can also mix these camera movements, like for example the pan and tilt motion, in this case in our Christmas horror short film, to reveal Evil Santa. Next up, the push-in. A push-in moves the camera closer to the subject, often used to draw attention to something important. The camera moves towards the subject, making it appear larger in the frame. You typically use a push-in to highlight an emotional moment, reveal important details, or make the audience feel closer to the character. It's effective for intensifying drama or tension. It's also very often used during a dialogue scene to change the shot type from, for example, a medium close-up to a close-up for intensified drama if the person is giving or receiving critical information. To avoid shaky footage, use a dolly, slider, or gimbal for smooth camera movement. But again, this can also be done as a handheld version. The opposite of a push-in is of course a pull-out. It involves moving the camera away from the subject. The camera moves backwards, making the subject appear smaller within the frame. Use a pull-out to reveal the bigger picture, like showing a character's surroundings or emphasizing their smallness in the environment. A pull-out can also perfectly be used to exit a scene by slowly moving away from the action. Next up, is it really a camera movement? I don't know. The zoom. A zoom changes the focal length of the lens to magnify or reduce the size of the subject within the frame. So unlike a push-in, a zoom doesn't involve the camera physically moving. Instead, the lens zooms in or out, changing the field of view. So is it really a camera move? Well, zooms can be used to highlight a detail or create a dramatic effect. They often have a retro or vintage feel reminiscent of 1970s filmmaking. So use zooms only when they fit, because they can take some of the cinematic feel away and make it look like a documentary, which again can also be a good thing if that is what you want. If you're shooting with a photo lens like this that doesn't have a servo zoom for smooth zooming, you can also digitally zoom in just like this for a subtle change, even though this isn't like real zooming where the background and perspective shifts and changes. And if you zoom in too much, it will get pixelated depending on the quality you're shooting with and the end product you're delivering. But just as a tip. Stop the zooming now. Speaking of zooming, the crash zoom. A crash zoom is a fast zoom in or out, typically used for a dramatic or comedic effect. The zoom happens quickly, creating a sudden change in perspective. Crash zooms can be used for sudden reveals, intense moments, or again, comedic timing. They add a sense of urgency or surprise to the shot. Adding a sound effect during a crash zoom can also heighten its impact and emphasize the movement. Next up, we have tracking or trucking. A tracking shot involves moving the camera horizontally along the subject. The camera moves parallel to the subject, maintaining the same distance throughout the movement. Use tracking shots to follow a character, keep up with action, or reveal new parts of a setting. To get a fluid tracking shot, you can ideally use a dolly or a gimbal. Then we got the jib or boom shot. A jib or boom shot usually uses a crane to move the camera up or down. The movement is smooth and can vary from a few centimeters to several meters, creating a dynamic change in perspective. Jib shots are great for introducing scenes or giving an epic feel to moments. They add a cinematic touch to any project. Combine jib shots with pans or tilts for a more complex and engaging shot. Nowadays, to create jib or boom shots, you don't have to use a big camera crane like back in the days. You can also use, for small movements, a gimbal, or for big movements, a drone. Next up, the dolly zoom. The dolly zoom is a classic technique where the camera moves closer or farther from the subject while simultaneously zooming in the opposite direction. This keeps the subject or object the same size but creates a warping or distortion in the background. The most famous use of this technique is probably in Jaws, and you can also do this in post again with some digital zooming if you don't have a zoom or servo zoom lens. Getting the dolly zoom right in camera takes a lot of practice, so make sure the speed of the camera movement matches the speed of the zoom for a smooth effect. Dolly zooms are often used to show a character's realization, anxiety, or a sense of disorientation. It's an iconic technique made famous by Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. That's why you also very often call a dolly zoom Vertigo effect. And it also looks cool in drone shots. Next up, we got the arc movement. Arc movements involve the camera moving in a circle or a semicircle around the subject. The camera moves around in a curve while maintaining focus on the subject. This can be a full 360 degrees, only a few meters around the subject, or even several rounds. Arc shots can make dialogue scenes more dynamic or emphasize a character's emotional state. They are powerful, but also can be distracting if overused. So especially use them for dramatic moments or to highlight key characters. And finally, let's talk about my favorite way to film, which is handheld. Reaching from a subtle handheld look with a natural feel to extreme shaky cam like Jason Bourne movies, putting you right in the action. With handheld shots, the camera movement is less stable, with natural shakes and shifts adding a sense of realism. Handheld shots are especially popular in action films, documentaries, and found footage style films. They can convey urgency, chaos, or intimacy. The shakier the camera, the more intense the scene will feel. Use subtle handheld movements for subtle emotions and more aggressive shakes for action. Now that's it from this episode on camera movements. I really hope you found it informative and useful. As always, if you have any questions left, feel free to leave them down below in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them all. Next week, we're going to talk about aspect ratios, so don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode of Filmmaking Friday. Until next time, goodbye.